I was still hooked up to the IV when my daughter Iris called, and the first thing she said wasn't, "Mom, how are you?" It was, "The doctor said you'd be discharged Thursday. Conrad and I already have plans that weekend." I remember staring at the ceiling of my hospital room in Savannah, Georgia, listening to the beeping of machines, holding the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. I had just come out of a 7-hour spinal surgery. I was 68 years old, alone in a room that smelled like antiseptic and cold air, and my daughter was telling me her weekend plans. "Iris," I whispered, "I can't drive myself home. I can barely lift my arm." There was a pause, then I heard my son-in-law Conrad's voice somewhere behind her, low and firm. "Your mom has money. She can hire someone." The call ended 2 minutes later. I lay there for a long time after that, not crying, not angry yet, just stunned. The way you feel when something you always feared finally arrives and you realize the fear was right all along. A few moments later, a woman in teal scrubs knocked softly and stepped inside. She checked my chart, adjusted the compression wrap around my left leg, and then looked directly at me in a way that most people don't look at women my age anymore. Like I was still a person worth seeing. "You're doing better than yesterday," she said. "That's not saying much," I answered. She smiled. "A real one. I'm Maeve. I'll be with you the next 2 nights." I didn't know it then, lying in that hospital bed in Savannah feeling completely erased from my own life, that Maeve Calloway was about to become the most important person in my world. People assume loneliness is about being physically alone. They're wrong. I had been surrounded by people for most of my adult life, and still spent the last decade of it quietly disappearing. My husband Gerald had died 6 years earlier from pancreatic cancer, 11 months after diagnosis. Before that, our house in Savannah was always full. Gerald coached youth baseball on weekends. He made terrible puns at breakfast and laughed at himself anyway. He called me Ellie even though my name is Eleanor because he said Eleanor was too much name for someone who made him feel that light. After Gerald died, the house went quiet in a way I still haven't gotten used to. Iris was 39 now. She lived 40 minutes away in a neighborhood with a homeowners association that sent letters about lawn length. She and Conrad had built a life that looked perfect from the outside, and I think they worked very hard to keep it looking that way. 2 incomes, a nice house, the right cars. What they didn't have was patience for anything that disrupted the image. I had overlooked a lot of things in the name of keeping peace. The Christmases they canceled last minute. The birthday dinners Iris forgot until I called first. The way Conrad spoke to me, like I was a slow child whenever I asked a question about technology. I told myself it was stress. I told myself everyone was busy. Mothers are very good at excusing their children's failures. We practice it until it becomes instinct. The morning of my surgery, I sat alone in pre-op holding a foam cup of nothing because they wouldn't let me have coffee. My hands were shaking. Spinal surgery at 68 is not a minor thing. The risks the surgeon listed the week before had replayed in my mind every night since. Paralysis, infection, blood clots. The long, quiet word, complications. Iris had promised to be there. She said it clearly at dinner 3 weeks earlier. "Mom, I'll be there before they take you in. I'll sit with you." By the time they wheeled me toward the operating room, the chair beside my bed was still empty. I checked my phone one last time. One text from Iris, sent 40 minutes prior, "Running behind. Traffic. Text me when you're out." I turned my phone face down and let them roll me away. The first thing I remember after surgery was pain shooting down my left side and a hand resting gently over mine. Not gripping, just resting. Present. "You're back," a voice said. "Surgery went well." I opened my eyes slowly. Maeve stood beside the bed calm as still water. "Your color is already better than most people's," she said. "That's a good sign." "My daughter," I said, the words thick from anesthesia. Maeve glanced around the empty room. "I haven't seen anyone come in yet, but I'll let you know the moment someone arrives." I turned my face toward the wall. I didn't want her watching me understand what that meant. Iris arrived 4 hours later. She stayed 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. She brought a gas station flower arrangement in a plastic sleeve and set it on the windowsill without unwrapping it. She asked if I needed anything, and before I finished answering, she was checking her phone. Conrad texted twice while she was there. She left saying she'd be back Friday. Friday was 4 days away. That evening, Maeve brought my medication and found me awake with the lights off. She didn't turn them on. She just pulled the chair closer and sat for a moment. "Do you want to talk, or do you want company?" she asked. "Because those are different things." Nobody had asked me that in a long time. "Company," I said. So she stayed a while, not speaking much, just present. And I realized I had forgotten what it felt like to have someone in the room who wasn't waiting to leave. Over the next 3 days, Maeve became the fixed point in an otherwise disorienting world. She helped me sit up when the pain made me gasp. She tracked down the specific brand of crackers I mentioned liking, the ones with the sesame seeds, and left a small stack on my tray without making a thing of it. She noticed when I was struggling before I said anything, and she had a way of helping that never made me feel helpless. On my second night, I woke at 2 a.m. to find her doing a quiet check of the monitors. I was already awake, which she seemed to sense. "You're thinking too loud," she said softly without turning around. "Is that a medical term?" "Should be." She adjusted something on the IV stand and turned. "Want to tell me what's keeping you up?" I looked at the dark window. I keep thinking about going home to an empty house and not being able to do the things I've done my whole life. Make breakfast. Walk down the back steps to the garden. Reach for things on shelves. Maeve was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My grandmother had a stroke at 70. She was the most stubborn woman I've ever known." A pause. She kept telling us she was fine, right up until she fell trying to prove it. "What happened?" "She let us help her." Maeve's voice was careful, quiet, and she got better. Slower, but better. She died at 86 planting tomatoes. Something in my chest loosened just slightly. "What was her name?" "Harriet. She would have liked you." I didn't know why that made my eyes sting. Maybe because it had been so long since someone said something kind to me without wanting something back. On the morning I was discharged, the attending nurse at the station confirmed my ride arrangements. I had scheduled a car service because I hadn't wanted to ask Iris again after the surgery. Hadn't wanted to hear the pause before she answered. Maeve appeared just as they were bringing my paperwork. "I'll wait with you downstairs," she said. "You don't have to." "I know." She picked up my small overnight bag before I could argue. While we waited in the lobby, she slipped a piece of paper into my hand. Her phone number written in neat block letters. "If anything feels wrong when you get home, or if you just need someone to talk at," she said, "call me." I looked at the paper. "You do this for all your patients?" She considered it. "I do it for the ones I worry about." The car arrived before I could figure out what to say. My house on Whitfield Avenue felt enormous when I walked in. Gerald and I had bought it 29 years ago, when Iris was still small enough to carry on my hip. He'd refinished the floors himself over 3 weekends, cursing under his breath the whole time, while I brought him iced tea and pretended not to find it funny. The house was full of those kinds of memories. They didn't disappear when Gerald died, but they changed. They became heavy instead of warm. I set my bag down in the hallway and stood there. Getting to the kitchen took longer than it should have. Every movement sent radiating protest through my spine. I couldn't reach the shelf where I kept soup. I couldn't lift the cast iron pot I'd owned for 30 years. I sat down at the kitchen table and breathed very carefully and tried not to think about how long recovery would take. My phone buzzed. A text from Iris. "Hope you got home okay. Let us know if you need anything." I stared at the message for a long time. That evening, I heard a knock at my front door. When I opened it, Maeve was standing on the porch holding 2 paper grocery bags and wearing the look of someone who had anticipated being turned away and decided to come anyway. "I was in the area," she said. "You live on the other side of the city. I was in the area, spiritually." I laughed. Actually laughed, the first real one in days. I stepped aside and let her in. She moved through my kitchen the same way she moved through hospital rooms. Quietly, efficiently, without making you feel like a burden. She heated soup, organized my medications by day, and time in small cups beside the sink, changed the dead batteries in the hallway smoke detector after noticing the blinking light. She didn't ask permission for any of it. She just saw what needed doing, and did it. We ate soup at the kitchen table. It was the first full meal I'd managed in a week. Afterward, I offered her coffee and she accepted, and we sat in the living room while the Savannah evening came in through the open window. Maeve looked at the photographs on the wall. Is that your husband? Gerald. He died 6 years ago. She studied the photo for a moment. Gerald at about 55, standing in front of his fishing boat with the widest smile he ever wore. He looks like someone who laughed a lot. He laughed at everything, including himself, which is rarer than people think. Maeve smiled softly. My dad was like that. Something settled between us, comfortable and unforced. We talked for an hour, maybe more. About Gerald. About her work. About the way hospitals have their own kind of rhythm that gets into you after years. About loneliness, in the oblique way you talk about hard things when you've just met someone you already trust. At one point, I noticed she'd gone quiet and was looking toward the hallway that led to my home office. Is that door always closed? She asked. I glanced over. It was open a few inches. I kept it closed. Always. I must have bumped it on the way in, I said, but something felt wrong as I said it. I walked down the hall slowly, Maeve following without being asked. I pushed the door open. The room looked almost normal. Gerald's old desk, the filing cabinet, the bookshelves. But the filing cabinet drawer was not fully closed. I always closed it. Gerald used to tease me about it. I moved closer. The drawer held our financial records, property documents, investment summaries Gerald's accountant had organized before he died. The folders were in the wrong order. Several papers sat at angles that didn't match how I arranged them. My hands started to tremble, and not from the surgery. I pulled out the top folder slowly. Inside was a letter I had never seen before. It was from a financial advisory firm I didn't recognize, dated 6 weeks earlier, addressed to my daughter, Iris Caldwell. My stomach dropped at the last name. She'd taken Conrad's name when they married. But seeing it typed on correspondence addressed to documents in my filing cabinet felt like cold water down my spine. Maeve read over my shoulder, quietly. Then she said, very carefully, Ellie, what is this? My eyes moved down the page. It was a preliminary inquiry. Requesting information about estate assets in situations where the primary account holder may require future assistance managing finances. It listed my name, my address, and a note in the margin in Iris's handwriting. Mom gets confused sometimes, widowed. Lives alone. May need support managing affairs in coming months. I sat down in Gerald's desk chair because my legs stopped working properly. She came here, I said. My voice sounded distant, even to me. While I was in the hospital, she came here and went through Gerald's files. Maeve didn't say anything right away. She set the papers down carefully and pulled the other chair close and sat across from me. Did she have a key? Yes, for emergencies. We looked at each other. I barely slept that night. I kept reading that note in my memory. Mom gets confused sometimes. I had called Iris by the wrong name exactly once, 2 Thanksgivings ago, when I was exhausted and had meant to say Iris and said Irene, the name of my college roommate. She had laughed about it at the time. Or I thought she had laughed. By morning, I had read every page in that folder twice. There were printed emails between Iris and someone at the firm. In one of them, she wrote, "She's not incapable yet, but we want to be positioned properly when the time comes. Property in Savannah has appreciated significantly, and the estate is likely larger than she discusses." That line, property in Savannah has appreciated significantly. Not, my mother has worked hard her whole life. Not, my mother is someone who deserves security. Just, the property has appreciated. Maeve arrived at 8:30. She let herself in with the key I'd given her the night before, and found me still at the kitchen table with the papers in front of me. She put the coffee on without speaking and sat across from me. "How much do they know about what you have?" she asked after a while. More than I realized, apparently. Gerald had been careful with money. His family came from very little, and that never left him. He had invested quietly, consistently for 40 years. He'd always said we were comfortable. What I hadn't fully understood until his accountant sat me down, the year after his death, was just how much comfortable had become. I had never told Iris the full picture. I didn't think she needed to know. I thought she was doing well enough on her own. Apparently she didn't agree. That afternoon my phone rang. "Iris," I answered. "Mom, I'm calling to check on you," she said in the cheerful voice she used when she was managing something. "I'm doing all right," I said. Good. A pause. "Conrad and I have been talking. We actually found a beautiful assisted living community out near Pooler. Very high-end. Activities, on-site medical, the whole thing. I closed my eyes for a moment. There it was. I'm not moving to assisted living, I said. I had back surgery 3 weeks ago. Right, but long-term, Iris. My voice came out quieter than I intended. Why did you go through my files while I was in the hospital? The silence lasted 4 full seconds. I counted. I was just checking on the house. You went through Gerald's filing cabinet. Mom. I was trying to understand your situations so I could help you plan. You contacted a financial advisory firm. Another silence. Longer this time. I was doing research, she said carefully. For your benefit. Whose name was on the inquiry? She didn't answer. Iris, my voice finally steadied. I have the letters. I heard her exhale. Then, the shift. The warmth drained out of her voice and something cooler took its place. You're not being rational about this. You've been through a trauma. You're not thinking clearly. That phrase, not thinking clearly. The same words women hear when their instincts make other people uncomfortable. I'm thinking very clearly, I said. I'll talk to you later. I hung up before she could say anything else. Maeve looked at me from across the kitchen. You okay? No. I surprised myself with how honest that came out. She said I'm not thinking clearly. Maeve's jaw tightened slightly. Then she said, people who want to take something from you usually start by trying to convince everyone, including you, that you can't be trusted. The truth of that sat in the room between us like something solid. I called Walter Fenn the next morning. He had been Gerald's attorney for 22 years and mine by extension. He was in his late 70s now, semi-retired, but he picked up on the second ring, and when I said my name, his voice went warm immediately. Eleanor. It's been too long. Are you all right? I don't think so, Walter. I think I need help. He asked me to come in that afternoon. Maeve drove me. She sat in the waiting room while I went in to see Walter, which mattered more to me than she probably knew. Walter listened to everything. He read every page of what I'd brought. By the time he finished, his expression had the particular stillness of someone choosing their words very deliberately. I want to tell you something important, he said, and I want you to hear it before we discuss anything else. I nodded. Eleanor, you are considerably wealthier than your daughter appears to realize. He opened a folder. Gerald's estate, combined with growth over the past 6 years, currently stands at approximately $11.4 million. I sat very still. I had known we were comfortable. I had not known the number, Walter continued carefully. Gerald structured several assets privately, particularly after Iris and Conrad's first significant debt problem 4 years ago. I looked up sharply. What problem? Walter set down his glasses. Gerald didn't tell you because he thought you would step in and absolve them of consequences. He paid off a home equity line they'd overextended, nearly $200,000. I felt the blood leave my face. Gerald had done that in secret, to protect me from a truth he knew I couldn't hear without acting on it. Is she in trouble again? I asked. Walter's silence answered before his words did. I leaned back and looked at the window. Outside, Savannah looked golden and ordinary. People walking dogs. A couple eating lunch on a sidewalk bench. Gerald had spent his life quietly surrounding me with protection I didn't even know was there. And now his daughter, our daughter, was standing outside that protection trying to find the gap. I need to change my will, I said. Walter didn't flinch. I thought you might. Let's talk about how. That conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. By the end of it, I had the outline of something that felt right for the first time in years. Not revenge. Something truer than that. I told Walter about Maeve, about what she had done, starting from the moment she held my hand in recovery, and continuing through every quiet act of care since then. I told him I wanted her recognized. Not as a windfall. As a truth. Walter wrote everything down and didn't ask me to justify any of it. I also told him what I wanted to do with the larger portion of the estate. Something Gerald would have understood immediately. He'd spent his career in construction, building things from the ground up, and he always said, the only buildings worth putting up were the ones people actually needed. I wanted to build something people needed. On the drive home, Maeve didn't ask what happened. She waited until we were almost back to Whitfield Avenue and then said simply, you seem like you made a decision. Several, I said. She nodded once. That was enough. That night Iris called again. This time her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. I know you went to see Walter Fenn today. Yes, he called me. I know, I asked him to. A sharp pause. You're making a serious mistake. You went through my husband's private files while I was under general anesthesia, I said. Tell me more about serious mistakes. Conrad and I are trying to protect you. From what, Iris? From being aware of my own finances. From being taken advantage of. Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment I thought I heard something real underneath it. Panic. Maybe even fear. Mom, that woman barely knows you. 3 weeks and you're treating her like family. She came to my house in the middle of the night when I needed help, I said quietly. Where were you? The silence after that was the longest one yet. Finally, Iris said something I hadn't expected. I don't know how to do this. Her voice had gone small. I don't know how to watch you get old. It scares me and I handle it wrong and Conrad doesn't help and I thought if we were prepared it would feel less frightening. I sat with that for a moment. Because I believed her. I believed it was true, and I also knew it wasn't the whole truth. Being frightened doesn't explain the financial inquiry you filed, I said. Or contacting an advisory firm about my property assets before you'd even asked how I was feeling. She didn't answer. I would have helped you, I said. If you were in trouble and you came to me honestly, I would have helped you. I've always helped you. A small sound on her end. Almost a sob. I know, she whispered. The conversation ended quietly, without resolution, without a fight. Just a long sadness that I carried to bed with me and lay awake beside for most of the night. 3 months later, I sat in Walter's office for the second time and signed my name to a new will. The Ellis Grove Foundation would receive the majority of the estate, a recovery and transition center for elderly patients without adequate support systems during and after medical crises. The kind of place where a woman discharged from spinal surgery would have somewhere to go that wasn't an empty house, where someone like Maeve could work with proper resources instead of sneaking crackers from the break room. Walter had named it at my suggestion. Grove, for the old grove of live oaks behind the house on Whitfield Avenue, where Gerald used to sit on weekend mornings with his coffee, not talking, just being there. Maeve was named executive director of the foundation. When I told her, she went very quiet. Then she said, I don't want you to do this because of everything I've done. I'm doing it because of who you are, I said. Which is why you did everything you did. She looked away, and I saw her jaw working the way people's jaws work when they're trying not to cry in front of someone. This is too much, she said. It's the right amount, I said. There was also a modest trust established for Iris, significantly smaller than the foundation allocation, and separate from any structure Conrad could access, and attached to it, in a sealed envelope, a letter I had spent 3 evenings writing and rewriting until every word felt true. I had also, at Walter's strong recommendation, established a clear medical directive and designated a healthcare proxy. Maeve's name was on it. I had thought long and hard about that part. It was a heavier thing to give a person than money. I told Maeve. She sat very still for a long moment. I don't want your daughter thinking I positioned myself for this, she said. She already thinks that, I said. It doesn't change what's true. Maeve looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, I'll honor it. Whatever you need. I believed her because I'd watched her. There is no better evidence than watching someone over time. 8 months after the surgery, I stood at the front entrance of Ellis Grove on a Tuesday morning in October, while the Savannah light came in sideways and gold across the courtyard. The building had been a former medical office, 2 stories, with wide hallways, and a back garden that Gerald would have approved of. We'd planted jasmine along the south wall. Maeve was inside somewhere, running through intake procedures with the first staff cohort. I could hear voices and the particular productive noise of people figuring out a new place together. A car pulled up. Noah, my nephew, 17 years old and home from school for the week, climbed out carrying a paper box of pastries from the bakery on Congress Street, because I had mentioned once that I liked their almond croissants. You look like you're about to cry, he said. I'm not crying, I said, and then immediately had to take a breath. He came and stood beside me and we looked at the building together. Noah's mother was my sister, gone now 4 years. He was the last living connection I had to my side of the family, and he had taken that seriously in a way that 17-year-olds rarely do. He called every Sunday. He remembered things I mentioned offhand. He had driven up from Jacksonville the night I got home from the hospital. Not because anyone told him to. Just because he thought he should. I had included him in the will in a way that would be available to him at 22, through an educational and transition trust that couldn't be touched or contested before then. Walter had made sure of it. "Grandma Ellie," Noah said. "I'm your aunt." "You're my Grandma Ellie," he said firmly, and I didn't argue. We ate the croissants on the front steps while Maeve came out and joined us, holding a coffee and looking at the building with the expression of someone who still couldn't quite believe it was real. Iris had not spoken to me in 4 months, since the contents of the new will had been formally disclosed. The letter I'd written to her had been delivered through Walter. I didn't know yet whether she'd read it. Walter said she had, and that she had sat in his office for a long time before leaving without speaking. I thought about her more than I expected to, not with anger, not with the grief of those hospital days, but with something more complicated. Sadness. Yes. A particular kind of mother's sadness that has no clean name. She had been frightened, and she had handled it badly. And in doing so, she had shown me something I could no longer look away from. People reveal themselves at inflection points. Iris revealed herself when she thought I was becoming vulnerable. And that revelation cost her more than she had planned for. Whether it changed her, I didn't know yet. The afternoon before Ellis Grove's first patient arrived, I walked through every room slowly. The pale yellow walls, the wide windows, the small library on the second floor with the comfortable chairs, because I had insisted on comfortable chairs. The physical therapy room with the mounted handrails, Gerald's former construction company, had donated when I called and explained what we were building. I sat down in one of the library chairs and looked out over the garden. A woman named Cheryl was arriving the next morning. 71 years old, hip replacement, 4 adult children spread across 3 time zones, none able to come. Her discharge planner had found us through a hospital social worker. She would be staying for 6 weeks. I didn't know Cheryl, but I knew what it felt like to be her. That was the whole point. Maeve knocked on the library doorframe and leaned against it. "Ready for tomorrow?" I looked at the garden. The jasmine wasn't blooming yet, too early in the season, but it would. "Yes," I said. And for the first time in a long time, I meant something entirely good when I said it.